Oh, hey everyone. Kristen, you're still on mute, but hey everyone. And back to you, Kristen. You're
Thanks for filling in, Tom.
That was my moment to shine.
Thank you everyone so much for being here with us today. I'm Kristen Bell from the Strategic Development Team here at Adobe, and this is Tom Beck, Executive Director of SoDA, and this is SoDA Series Live. SoDA Series Live is a collaboration between Adobe and SoDA, where we bring you candid, in-depth discussions with design leaders from all around the world, and we invite you to be a part of those conversations. We host this on our Creative Cloud LinkedIn channel, but I'm super excited to share that we're now also streaming to Behance. So shout out to our Behance followers. Thanks so much for being with us there. If you are on LinkedIn, please say hi in the chat. Tell us where you're joining from. Tell us what you do, what you're interested in learning today, all the things. We'll be fielding questions for our guests throughout the show, so don't be shy. But before we get started, Tom, do you want to take a moment and just tell folks a little bit about SoDA?
Yeah, of course. And Kristen, thanks for having us as always. And I'm Tom Beck. I'm Executive Director of SoDA. SoDA is a global community for the founders and owners and leadership teams of digital design studios. We were founded in 2007 with the express goal of using the power of the community to become smarter, more connected, to share insights and inspiration about how to better run our businesses. Today, we're about 95 member companies spanning 20 countries, and many of our members are considered some of the best digital agencies in the world. And we're just thrilled Adobe has been with us since the very beginning in 2007, and we're just thrilled to partner with you guys on this series.
Oh, thank you. We really enjoy it. And we love just the collaboration and helping to bring some of your insights, not just within your community, but also with the broader community. So thank you for partnering with us on that. And thanks to your members too. We're super excited to have one with us today. So to get started, I will introduce Talon Wadsworth, who is Principal Designer here at Adobe. Hey, Talon.
Hey, Kristen. Hey, Tom.
Hey, Talon.
Excited to be back with you both.
Yeah, we missed you.
I missed you too.
Yeah, we so miss you. We're super excited to partner with you on this. So thank you. And for those who don't know Talon, he's a principal designer here at Adobe, our collaborator in these SoDA Series live sessions, and just returned from an amazing sabbatical, which we might get a chance to learn a little bit more about later if time allows.
For sure.
And yeah, he's wonderful at conversing with designers and really has a passion for connecting with the community. So
thanks, Kristen.
Thanks
so
much.
Just the best part of my job, really.
Love it.
Being able to talk about design all the time.
Yeah. Well, we love it. Thanks for sharing it with the rest of the world here. So Tom, would you introduce Amanda, our guest?
Yeah, absolutely. So today we're happy to have Amanda Ford. Amanda is the Executive Creative Director at Ready Set Rocket. And Ready Set Rocket is a longtime member in the SoDA community, and I've known the founders for many years and just loved watching their growth and evolution. Today, they're an integrated digital agency and just doing incredible work for brands like Puma and the NBA and Carnegie Hall and many, many others. And as I mentioned, Amanda's Executive Creative Director there, and we're just thrilled to have you today. Thanks for joining us, Amanda.
Well, thank you all. Super excited.
Thanks for joining. So I mentioned earlier, Tom and I will be monitoring the chat. Feel free to ask any questions that you'd like Talon or Amanda to discuss or dive deeper into, and we'll share those with them to address throughout the show. And yeah, thanks so much for being with us.
Have a great conversation today.
Thanks, Tom. Thanks, Kristen. Amanda, welcome. Thank you for being here with us this morning.
Hey, yeah, super excited to join you all. Haven't done one of these in a while, so it's exciting for me.
It's great. I mean, like I was saying, like this is really the best part of my job. To be working at a creative tools company and get to just talk about design all day long, like that's a pretty good gig. So I'm really excited to talk with you. I know you and I had a little bit of a setup conversation the other day, but we're going to dig into some of these topics that I think get us both maybe a little excited, see what kind of roads we go down. But first, let's just start with let's get a little introduction to yourself. Tell us a little bit about your journey. Like, how did you what's been your journey, in the creative fields and ending up, at Ready Set Rocket?
Yeah, I mean, I guess we could go back to college. I went to school for graphic design, so started out in the design track. I was most interested, honestly, in like magazines at the time and editorial design, and that was still somewhat of a viable option, even though print was definitely heading, to its. It's not over, but it was slowing down quite a bit. So yeah, tried that out for a bit. Worked brand side, worked at MTV, which was really fun. And then kind of just went over to agency side. I just really wanted to be able to work on different kinds of work, different industries, different clients. So yeah, kind of have been at some great shops over the years, everything from Huge to Ogilvy. And then I've been at Ready Set Rocket for the last 6 years. And this gig really has allowed me to come full circle because, throughout the course of my career, I've kind of gone back and forth between, I love design, I love being hands-on in the craft, but also just love big ideas and thinking and advertising. So being able to put the two together, this was kind of, the perfect spot because, it's small and, there's a lot of work that you get to get your hands on and it's a fun place to work.
Yeah, I can imagine you and I have had similar trajectories where I think, I started more as a graphic design focus, but very quickly early on, we were doing a lot of digital projects alongside there. It's like, I would have been happy, designing rock and roll posters like all day long. That was the original inspiration for going to design school, but like quickly, doing websites and interactive work and, like how has that transition been? Or has it been really just more kind of organic? Like as the work has gone, so has your career?
Yeah, I mean, it was actually like a really, really nice sort of transition going from, being really into print and editorial design at one time and then getting more heavy-handed into web and web design because there's just a lot of parallels there. Just, even at the tactical design level and nerding out and thinking about grids and typography and things like that. A lot of the same principles apply when you're thinking about, laying out a book or a magazine and as well as like a website. There's just that additional layer of, you're trying to get people to do more than turn a page. There's a lot of layers there in terms of the experience and things like that. And that's the part that got me really excited because there's just so much possibility with digital. There's some best practices and those are always changing, but it's really just this like really ripe playground. So I love the fact that every year there's new technology, new trends, new things that are sort of like impacting the work that we do. So it keeps it really interesting and keeps us on our toes.
Yeah, it resonates with me so much because not that print was figured out by any means, doing really cool things with like printing processes and like there's lots to still do there, but digital just really opened up like a ton of possibilities, even from like early days from like Flash, like all the way through to more sort of native, app and product work. Like, the problem set's just really complex and really deep, and thinking about it from all these different perspectives, like. It's just a really cool space to work in, to be in. Like the potential there is infinite in its way, compared to maybe a technology, a medium that we've lived with for so long and has had its impact on us. And now we're here working in this new medium, and what's its impact going to be on us, and how do we play a part in that? That's really interesting.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Nice. Well, cool. Well, tell us a little bit about Ready Set Rocket. So now we've learned a little bit about you, kind of your journey. Tell us a little bit about Ready Set Rocket, and you've been there, you said, for 6 years. Tell us a little bit about that, about what Ready Set Rocket does, what kind of the focus is there for the team, and just kind of the team setup and kind of how what it looks like there day to day at Ready Set Rocket.
Yeah. I mean, we kind of over the years go back and forth with how to talk about ourselves. So everything from like a digital agency to a marketing agency to a creative agency. But I think, we're very much a full service agency today. We have really robust teams across media, strategy, and creative. And even within each of those teams, there's just so many skill sets that we have now in different backgrounds that really makes us, able to kind of take on almost anything these days, in the worlds of marketing and design and digital. So yeah, it's really exciting. And within the creative team itself, we've gotten a lot of scale, I think, with, the move towards, especially with social, the move towards everything being in motion or video led. So we've really seen that boom over the years, and just like our motion capability really kind of rise with that. So building out a little motion team within our creative team. And then the same goes with like copywriting and messaging and storytelling, like that's even more important than ever. I mean, it always was, but I think with, digital and social and thinking about the feed, like it's really just about like what's going to get them to stop and how do all those things work together. And sometimes that's a message, sometimes that's something moving across the screen. But yeah, it's really cool to put all of our heads together and kind of work on stuff like that every day.
Yeah. I mean, it's so interesting, like you said, you've always struggled to speak about the work that you're doing over the years, because it always feels like, especially in the agency and studio world, that you're in a constant state of invention. You're in a constant state of sort of storytelling, and almost as you speak it, you're sort of iterating on it in real time. What are we doing now, or what can we be doing? What do we want to be doing? I think that's always one of the exciting parts of it, but also one of the most stressful parts is like, how do we get people to understand what it is we actually do here?
Exactly. Yeah. And that's something that like, it's easy for us to forget, when there's a brief comes in, because a lot of times, as we know, clients try to lead with what they think they need or want, and they're not necessarily don't have their ear to the ground necessarily as much as, like an advertising agency or digital agency where, we're keeping an eye on the trends, we're keeping an eye on like what's actually happening day to day and what can really like drive the results for them and make an impression. And it might not be, what it was 6 months ago. So that's something that keeps us always kind of thinking and trying to poke our head up and make sure that we're actually paying attention to what's going on and, making sure we're connecting the best way we can with the audiences that we're speaking to.
Yeah. On that, can I speak a little bit, to, again, the client, never really knowing exactly what they need. Speak a little bit to how like the things that the clients are asking for have changed, say in the time that you've been at Ready, Set, Go, and how that's led to the change in how you structure your team or how you staff up. And because I think we, in your title card, it talks a little bit about the integrated team. So let's kind of unpack that a little bit. Let's start with because again, oftentimes we'll organize ourselves to meet the client needs. So how has the client's needs changed, especially in the last 5 to 6 years that you've seen?
Yeah, I mean, they're really looking for, it used to be, brands would sort of kind of go to a specialized shop for everything that they needed. It was like, need a big commercial or need a above the line tagline and go to this big agency over here. And I need, social, I'm going to go to the social agency and I need all these things. And it's like more and more, everyone's realizing that it's not this siloed way of thinking, like when you're talking about a consumer, they're interacting with your brand in so many places. So if you have 10 different agencies working on crafting your story, there's going to naturally be, it's inefficient, but also there's naturally going to be like some disjointed communication there. So I think, having a brand be able to come to one place and be able to do almost everything, not necessarily everything, but almost, it just allows you to be way more effective in moving the needle for them, because everything's kind of tying back to one cohesive strategy that we're all kind of thinking through together.
Yeah, for sure. Like I think brands are much more aware than they have been in the past of all the different digital touch points of which their customers or their users are starting to interact with them. And you're right, like we've seen that value of a consistent message or tone or design aesthetic become more and more important. So you're right, like being set up to handle much more of the integrated story, the thing that follows that journey of the user from the social feed, all the way through to the website, like into the product, whether that be digital or physical, that you're really seeing a much more kind of holistic take, on the approach there. So, yeah, exactly. And I think that's where, we get the most satisfaction, but also I think the clients and the audience is like when everything, more things are sort of cohesive and connecting together because, we've all had those experiences of sort of clicking on an ad and the experience that's on the other side does not match, or you're just like, oh, this brand doesn't look so cool. Like that ad, kind of tricked me, and you might change your mind. So there's like things like that to think about of just like the brand equity, the consistency, and just like making sure, what it is that you want to get across and what you want people to do is consistent through all your touch points. Yeah. I feel like we're finally being able to like address the design problem in the way that we always wanted as designers, right? We were always thinking about all the different facets of this, but it really does the client understand the value of that? And it feels like just now, like we're scratching the surface, like we're really starting to connect all the dots, and the clients are like going like, yes, I see the value of that, you know?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it took a while for the tables to turn, you know, and even just in the way they think about the value they're going to get out of, you know, some social ads over putting all of their money into like, you know, one, you know, Super Bowl spot or something like that.
Yeah.
You know, and there's obviously different strategies that are behind those things, and there's a good value to all of it. But yeah, just the fact that you can measure digital, you can get way more tailored with who is going to see it. There's just a lot more sort of, you know, two-way kind of communication there in terms of just like being able to test and learn things and iterate and kind of constantly evolve. So
yeah. So how do you set up a team then to work in that much more integrated way? Again, like you said before, like these workflows or these needs were very siloed in the past. You know, you sort of had design happening over here, you know, UX design or UI design, you know, website. You had brand over here. You had content sort of coming in from over here. So how do you structure a team, and how do you structure a process to be able to work in a very fluid and dynamic way where you really are connecting, you know, all these different work streams and different touch points, you know, into a cohesive output?
yeah, I mean, that really varies, I'd say, project to project, but we do just try to make sure that there's like, you know, collaboration at the really key points, especially like in the upfront of any project where you're, you know, figuring out the strategy and, you know, trying to figure out like, how are we carving out the space? How are we going to, you know, if the ask is we want to disrupt the space, or we want to, you know, reinvent our brand, or whatever it is, like kind of putting our heads together up front and making sure that there's like a lot of communication there initially between sort of creative and strategy, and sort of putting our heads together and making sure that that is something we feel good to kind of head towards. And then, yeah, just kind of finding key collaboration points along the way to make sure, you know, because everyone's doing, you're ultimately always going to go off on your own and kind of work on something, but making sure when we come back together that there's, you know, that there's sort of flexibility there. And that's really where the magic happens, is like, you can write a great piece of copy, but once you plug it into design, things might change, or you might have another idea once you see it, and kind of having things go back and forth that way is really where we get the best work, and kind of allowing some of that natural agility to kind of come into the process.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, really having that conversation where each of the different roles within the team or different groups can influence each other, right? So get to that next sort of best result. Yeah. So you mentioned, so you have, you know, design, is that kind of like define that a little bit, then you have strategy, and then what are some of the other components of the team, and some of those skill sets? You mentioned motion, animation, things that you've been ramping up. So tell us a little bit about the makeup, or at least some of the skill sets or groups that you try and prioritize to build that can to have a very, you know, integrated approach.
Yeah. Typically, I mean, you know, on a project that kind of calls for like the most integration, I would say, you know, we almost always have like a designer, and then someone that's kind of at the director level, like creative director, art director, to kind of contribute in terms of like how we conceptually bring in the strategy to life, making sure we're keeping things on track there. And then partnering with like a copywriter. And then, you know, depending on the vertical or what we're working on, you know, it might be different types of strategy that calls for, because we have a lot of specialists now across like social strategists and content strategy, creative strategy. So there's always somebody plugging in there to kind of make sure that, you know, we're coming in and challenging the business and like coming up with something that's actually gonna, you know, achieve what a brand's looking for, and we're staying on track there.
Yeah. And do you feel like you try a balance between, you know, more specialized roles versus more kind of generalist roles, and are you prioritizing one or the other? Like you have a designer who might be doing a little bit of content creation, or, you know, or the like do you try and get a good balance, or are you really looking though more to like weave together a lot of specialist workflows?
Yeah, I mean, it's a little bit of both. I think on the creative team historically, and it's still the case, I think we tend to hire folks who aren't just, you know, in terms of like the design track, you know, if you're solely interested in like, I only want to work on, you know, websites or things like that, we can't get that specialized. We try to like, you know, find folks that do have that versatility, you know, and are interested and just have strong foundational creative skills that can apply to more tactical things like UI design, but they can also get into content creation and, you know, work on storyboards and things like that. So I think it's a great model for, you know, creatives that like don't necessarily want to choose that specific track or not yet. They're able to kind of dip their toes into like a lot of different things, and creates a really well-rounded skill set, because there's a lot of cross-pollination that happens between even like, you know, the side of the brain you have to use to design a website, as well as like working on a bunch of social content. They're different, but there's a way of thinking systematically and how you apply the brand and thinking about patterns. And there's a lot of things that like apply to both. So it's really interesting to see, you know, when you bring in creatives that have more, might have specialized previously in something else, and what they're able to bring to other sort of verticals and things like that makes it really strong.
Yeah. One of the groups kind of rubbing off a little bit on each other, you know, and just like helping people kind of see like, oh, there's a bigger picture, but also trying to craft like really great, high quality, high fidelity content, and sort of the push and pull of that, you know, being consistent versus having a unique voice and message. Yeah. It's a really interesting tension, you know, like we see that even internally between our, you know, our kind of marketing studio team and our product designers, you know, they're coming at it in a very different way, but if we don't pull it all together, like, then we're really opening the door to gaps in the user experience and from the end-to-end journey. Yeah, for sure.
Right. Yeah, no, exactly. I think that's where, like, I think with creative work, especially, I think everyone is guilty of this at some point in their career, or more often, of just like getting really attached to the work and taking it very personally. So I think the cool thing about collaboration, especially, you know, cross-disciplinary, across different groups and backgrounds, is like it kind of pulls you out of that a little bit. It kind of forces you to be like, okay, I have to consider these other perspectives. Maybe I was just looking at it through a design lens or through like my experience as a designer, and even the outside experiences that you bring to the table that affect the work, from like your background to where you live to how you grew up to your culture and all of those things. So I think the more collaboration, everyone can always bring something to it that's gonna help make sure that we're thinking of the work, you know, from all angles and not through too narrow of a lens.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, some of the best sort of like, you know, inspiration moments I've had on, you know, UX design is when an engineer is really looking at the work and evaluating the work. You know, some of my best collaborations, you know, happen with someone who feels like they're doing something very far and away from like the creative field. Like, those are my best partnerships, you know, when there's really someone kind of coming at it from a completely different perspective, right? Like, those are some of the best moments.
Yeah, and they're going to question things that maybe you took for granted, because it's easy, like when we are working on the same type of things, you know, as like a designer, for example, that like, oh yeah, everyone knows that this is a button. I've always done buttons like this, whatever the thing is. But like, it takes sometimes somebody that's not in your world to come in and question that and be like, I didn't realize that was a button. And then maybe it makes them look at it differently, you know, because it's easy to just be like, take things for granted, you know. I guess when you're looking,
we can all, as designers, we can also kind of get into our own little like insular bubble, you know, where we're sort of speaking in these languages, and people are like, "What are you even talking about? Does that even matter, really?" It's like, oh, does it? We think it does. We think it's important, but maybe others don't. You know, definitely good to burst that bubble a little bit, for sure.
Totally.
Well, we have our first question here, which I think is maybe a kind of a nice moment to speak to maybe a little more specifically. Again, we've been talking kind of very generally about the work here, but from Kurtz in the chat, he was asking, could you tell us how Ready Set Rocket is assisting American Museum of Natural History in design? Maybe tell us a little bit more about that project. Yeah,
we've done a lot for them over the years. Our first big project with them is the website that's currently up. We did their new website in 2016, I believe, or 17. And that was a really fun project to work on. I led the creative on that with an incredible team. And since then, we've been brought in to work on a lot of things, even beyond design. Like, we got to work on sort of, I think, very nerdy title, but like consumer journey mapping, which was basically like they had a research firm kind of look at every touch point a person possibly interacts with the museum, from like the site to the bathrooms to the ticket line to signage, and kind of just like assess where there could be gaps or things that are wrong. And we kind of help them take that and turn that into like tangible insights and kind of basically be the starting point of like new briefs essentially for them or for us of just like, this is something we need to look at. Yeah. And then we've also worked on, they have an app as well that's really nice. It's like a nice component for when you're in the museum to help you navigate around and kind of find the different exhibits you're looking for. And it also has like an AR component in there that's really cool that we helped with, where it's taking, if it's still in there, I haven't looked in a while, but you were able to take like their big T-Rex and place it anywhere. So yeah, worked on all kinds of stuff for them. Oh, it's also like digital signage we did a bit of last year as well. So that's pretty cool. So yeah.
That's exciting. I mean, connecting
client,
the physical and the digital space and taking some of the same problem solving skill sets and applying that to navigating a physical space. You and I were kind of joking about the metaverse, I think, as we were in our little green room beforehand. But like that seems like, what are we missing if we're sort of wholly focused on digital? And I think given an opportunity, like what a great opportunity to sort of just jump on, is be able to sort of now expand that and connect the storylines now into that physical world. What a cool opportunity.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's some of our favorite work historically, at least for creative. We really enjoy like the working on the cultural institutions, just because, like you said, there's that physical component. It's a place you can go to. It also helps that it's a very famous place that people know. So you get, when you're telling people what you do for a living and they're like, oh yeah, that's from Night at the Museum. There's some sort of reference. They like know what you're working on. So that makes it even more fun, just that sort of cultural relevancy and working on, a museum that, is kind of responsible for like preserving history and looking forward. It's just like a really cool topic.
Yeah, what a great space to work in. I got one of my first big projects out of school on the West Coast was we designed the exhibit space for the Academy of Sciences in Golden Gate Park.
Oh, that's really cool.
And so, and of course, expanding the group of collaborators even to fabricators and even to the architects. We got to work with Renzo Piano's group, and and you start to start to see the design problem in a much wider scope, right? Sort of connecting experiences that traverse across all these different touch points. I think it is one of the most just satisfying or sort of brain teasing kind of ways to go about the work. So it's an exciting project.
Yeah.
All right, next time I'm in New York, I'm gonna have to go and because I haven't been in a long time to the museum, so.
Yeah, I mean, it's very much like there's aspects of it that haven't changed in decades, but I think that's what makes it special. Is just some of that consistency there that you can expect to see.
Preserving it, like you're saying.
Exactly.
As an experience, yeah, for sure. Well, let's take a shift for a minute here, and let's talk kind of more broadly about design. We've talked kind of about the work there. We've sort of set up some of your journey and the work that you've done there at RSR. Let's take a more broader lens in design and how you've sort of seen changes in both in process and tooling. And there's a topic that you and I were talking about where we started talking about authorship when it comes to these new tools that we're seeing sort of crop up. And I think every designers are coming out of school has to wrestle with that idea of authorship, because now instead of working singularly, now you're working with a team of people. But now with some of these tools that we're seeing, that start to automate much more of the process, what is the role of the designer? How is it changing in your mind? And how are you thinking about the impact of these tools on the work and the team and the work that your teams are doing?
Yeah, I mean, it's a big topic. It's an interesting one because there's the drive towards, I think, naturally technology and software. Its whole goal is to sort of give you a tool to do something. And so naturally, as it improves and evolves, it's usually creating more efficiencies. So I think, like you said, with automation, we've gotten to this point where there's so many things, when we're designing and you look at the different tools that are out there now, the Adobe Cloud and the Figmas and all of those things where, there's certain things that you don't have to really put a huge manual hand on anymore. So it's nice in the sense of the time that it saves and the efficiencies. But then there's the other flip side of that of just it's kind of taking away a little bit of that craft and that special touch of if you realize you can just press a button or do something in 5 minutes and it'll just repeat, a bunch of rows of something for you, you might just be cool and call it a day because you can move on to your next, phase of the project or whatever. So I think sometimes that ends up winning over the like craft or the quality and the that sort of thing, which is, I think, the real conversations. It's like, making sure we're not moving so fast that we're forgetting about that part. And like, and then that's when things really, we're already seeing it. I mean, you can kind of see it out there, especially if you're on Instagram or Pinterest a lot, things start to kind of get a little bit more homogenous. And a lot of that is because of the tools, I believe, and because we're all like looking at the same stuff over and over. So yeah.
I mean, having come and found a home here at Adobe and loving sort of this idea of creating tools for people, you definitely want to make tools easier to use, because there is an inefficiency in navigating complex tools, whether it's Photoshop or Illustrator or, even the more simplified tools, Sketch, Figma, others. Like, there's still the overhead of just using the tool, right? So knowing all the different ways in which you need to choreograph to get something done. And so there is something to be gained. Tools, any tools of any kind, are always driven towards efficiency. If I can make more of this thing that I do day to day, and I can streamline my tools and my processes, and I make more money in theory, right? That's sort of the traditional kind of craftsman sort of approach. If this tool helps me do this one repetitive task over and over and over again in a much faster way, in theory, that's better, right? But what, if I start there, if I've sort of skipped out on all the sort of learning on how to get to that step of doing that repetitive thing and being good at it, and I just jump right there, it's like, oh, here's this kit of parts, here's this design system, all right? Like, have I missed out on some kind of more integrated learning or iterative learning, and why those things are that way, how they've come to be built that way, I mean, you see that, like, because, in your career, as you've worked with designers of all different sort of experience levels, some probably more experienced, some coming out of school. Are you noticing anything there in the approach, to the expectations that the different designers have, as they come in and start to acclimate, to the sort of agency environment?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's definitely like an openness to learning new tools, which is great. I think it's going a lot faster than it used to be. So it's, where it used to be where you might use the same software for like 8 years and then switch, it's like people are switching and trying new things or adding new tools to the repertoire like pretty quickly. So I think that's great. There's always like sort of this problem solving sort of approach of just like, wanting to make great work and like whatever it takes for us to like be able to do that within the parameters that we have. So that's, I think, nice. And then, I mean, in terms of like the craft, I think everyone's very much aware of the fact that like the danger of the automation and or being too data led and just like removing the sort of right side of your brain entirely. So I feel like we're all very self-aware of it. So there's a lot of sort of push and pull there where it's like, okay, let's be efficient on these things and do that really fast and just let the like software kind of like assist us there. And then other places, let's spend a little bit more time on and iterate. And so I think as long as there's sort of like a balance there and we're not being, funneled down the path too quickly with letting efficiency drive everything, I think we'll be okay, as long as we're looking at it as like a way to assist and help us achieve a result and not be the solution.
Yeah, assistive. That seems like that key word that really struck me right there when you said that, because I think, you have, like I said, this tension, but you have this sort of downside of, adopting the values more so of the tools than of like the design or the user. That sort of perspective of saying, well, what is the author? What is the human hand in this? And are we allowing a decision to be made for us because it's fast, it's efficient, it's expedient, right? I can just look at this data and it tells me that this is the most successful version of this thing, whatever it might be. And if I let that guide my decisions, how am I letting that, sort of morph my own process or morph the outputs? And then where do we end up? Do we end up in that kind of like, dribblization, of design, where we've sort of now given up agency and control, to the tool.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. When we're letting process or the tool sort of dictate the output versus like, because sometimes I think that's really where you see the most growth in in, I guess, really all backgrounds in the agency world, but like in creatives, like if you can't answer like why you did something a certain way or back it up or rationalize it. And sometimes there isn't an answer because they realize they did it a certain way because it was easiest or because that was the solution the tool dictated. And that's like, I think when we get into those problems of like where we totally forgot about the user along the way, we're just kind of like on autopilot and literally. So I think that's where it's important to just be like, stop and check ourselves all the time. We're like, are we just moving through this at whatever's easiest to achieve? Or are we actually like remembering what the purpose of this deliverable we're making is? Because it's easy to like lose that along the way, especially for the more, detail oriented folks like designers.
Yeah, and there's always something, even in those repetitive tasks, I always feel, and as I tell a lot of my team this, is that even those repetitive tasks, like there's something to learn, right? That we don't get sort of seduced by that efficiency, because in doing something over and over again, our brain actually is learning. Our brain is actually developing an idea, even again through those very tedious moments. Like we're problem solving. There is also a trap. You can get kind of trapped and go down that rabbit hole as well. And then now you've sort of myopically focused on this one thing versus like the overall. But like there is, something to be learned and something to be gained, through your brain working through those steps over and over again.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So we have a question that's kind of related to all this, and maybe this is just sort of like a hot take time from Rahul in the chat. He's like, what are your views on the future of UX in kind of the Web 3.0 world? We were kind of joking about the metaverse, but like what role is UX have to play, as we start to dive into more kind of virtual experiences? We've moved sort of beyond kind of that static web page sort of experience now into a much more immersive and dynamic world. What does the role of UX play in there, or design just more broadly?
Yeah, I mean, that's like a good question. I think, when you think about UX now and you're looking at the screen, I mean, it's 2D and it's very much visual. It's like, okay, you have a user journey in mind or something you're trying to get them to do. So it's like, okay, we want them to look at this headline or look at this button or whatever. And it's a little bit more, I think, cut and dry what you need to do there, where I think with the metaverse, there's just going to be so many more sets of variables that a UX designer has to think of, because it's not just flat and like 2D design. It's like what's in front of you, behind you, above you, all around you. And then there's, things like, if you want someone to like walk behind you or go a certain way. I mean, I guess this is also probably the problem of like a video game designer, but it's like UX design then becomes, do we consider audio? It's not just like a visual thing anymore. It's like, okay, how do we get them to like, focus their attention over there or something? So I think it's just much more multimedia, but I think it will be exciting. There'll just be like so many ways we can think about sort of guiding people through experiences.
Yeah. And one thread, and I know you and I have talked about this previously, and you've spoken about this before, but is also the role of accessibility. Like as we dive into these new worlds, these new sort of virtual worlds, like who are we leaving behind? Like we get really caught up in the excitement, in the innovation, and the newness of it all these new variables to play with. But what's kind of the role and the responsibility of the designer in making sure those experiences are as broadly as accessible as possible in your mind?
Yeah, I mean, that will be a big one for sure. I think there's gonna be a lot there in terms of like how the experience kind of is made to be as inclusive as possible. So there's gonna be a lot of things to consider, and I think it will definitely be, I think, a learning curve and something that will require a lot of I think collaboration between like the developers and designers, as well as like the folks like working on the actual content, just to think about that. But yeah, I mean, I think it's going to be an interesting one, and I think it'll require, like you said, like I think not letting the sort of bells and whistles and the jazziness of just being in a 3D world, kind of like not letting us forget that like there's, it's an experience, and if you want someone to do something, it needs to be accessible by everybody and not just something really cool to experience for a select few.
Yeah. I mean, just kind of going back a little bit to Ready Set Rocket, is there a way in which you approach accessibility with the team? Like, is there a way in the process or in the tool setup or the ways or even the brief coming from the client? Is accessibility kind of something that you're prioritizing and something that you're trying to sort of make more part of that sort of day-to-day sort of process on all the projects there at RSR?
Yeah, I mean, it went from like years ago from it being, I think when it comes to like a client like American Museum of Natural History, like a nonprofit, where you're serving the public, it's usually ingrained in their business model. It's like a requirement, I think, for them, like that they have to be accessible. So it's something that's way more top of mind and literally, in our briefs and things like that. But a lot of other clients don't necessarily, brands necessarily like talk about it much or bring it up. I think they either forget about it and we're kind of reminding them as we're kind of creating work for them, or it's something that's just not necessarily on everyone's radar yet, which is surprising. But yeah, we kind of, at this point, we're very much, the creative team especially, it's just integrated into all of our work, the way we approach it. We don't kind of wait till the end. So when we're designing something, there's a lot of great tools out there. We'll use contrast checkers and things like that if we're designing a site. If we're working on a brand identity, we make sure the way that color is applied or type and things like that is going to be accessible, that we have that thought through. So it's not something that, is uncovered later on when the brand is trying to use their new identity and gets into trouble. So it's just something we try to keep in the foreground and top of mind and just kind of bake into our processes versus waiting, for a brand to necessarily ask about it, because, it's something that should just be inclusive as we're doing the work. So
yeah, and I love that. Like and oftentimes I think working in a design team internally, especially in the tech industry, that's really driven by a certain set of business goals and metrics. Definitely can be an uphill battle. But do you feel like the agency perspective gives you a little more authority on topics like that? Like you're really educating and like offering a value to the client kind of above and beyond, just like the normal services.
Yeah, no, definitely. It's something they're usually very much sort of surprised sometimes, or just very excited to know that like that's something that we thought about, because they're like, oh, that's, when we bring it up, because like, sometimes feedback can come in obviously, and like that might impact a decision we made that was driven by accessibility. And that's usually when we're kind of like, we'll kind of make the recommendation that we don't go a certain route because of that. And that's when they realize, okay, like this actually has like a real value to it. And it's not something that we're, that it informed, the work that we're creating. And it's important that it's something that we maintain.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
So we had another question from Rahul, and we really appreciate all the if you have any questions in the chat, Rahul, thanks for your next question. But this is one of my favorite questions, because I think it, again, like one of the best things about these interviews that we do is really exposing, professional work, to a wide audience. And so Rahul's question is kind of a little on that, which is, as someone new to the UX designer, as a newbie UX designer, as he puts it, what are some skills or tools that they can learn to focus on, maybe to kind of help them in their journey, like, thinking back even like to your experiences and growth as a designer? What are some things that you would prioritize?
Yeah, I mean, I think one thing that will never change is starting with pen and paper. I think that's the best way to start for any creative task you're doing, and just making sure you're not jumping into the software too soon. I think for a lot of the reasons we were talking about before, of just like that's when you might kind of be driven more by the tool or the efficiency versus really like thinking it through first. So yeah, definitely starting with good old-fashioned pen and paper. And then there's a lot of great tools out there for UX now. Adobe XD, has like a lot of wireframing capabilities and things like that. Developing design systems, there's the Figmas and Sketches of the world as well. But I think it's less about the tool and really just like making sure you're really, keeping that user top of mind and thinking through getting them from A to B in the best way possible. I think another interesting thing too, I remember hearing this years ago at an agency I was working at, and they had a UX director, and they did like a lunch and learn, and they kind of boiled down and were explaining UX in layman's terms for people who didn't like totally understand it. And she used an example of like, it was, I'm in New York, so there's like a lot of those kind of cafes and different things where you can kind of get everything. There's like build your own salad, build your own pasta, whatever, get a coffee over here. There's like 10,000 things you can get in one place. But she was using it as an example to explain UX, how the when she's in there, she's like, she thinks about the UX of the place and the experience because it's awful. And then we all were like, yeah, you're right. That's what that is. It's UX because, you know, they had like the register like before you get the coffee, and then you had to go backwards to get the milk and then go another place to get your other thing, and things weren't in an efficient order. So all that's to say, you know, UX is everywhere. So I think thinking about that as you're going through the world too, there's probably a lot there that you can learn about just how people experience things that you can apply.
That's a great recommendation. I always, you know, I'm a huge advocate for just awareness and curiosity, you know, in any designer, you know, that there is, you know, like being aware of the world, being aware of the experiences that you're interfacing with, and learning from that. You know, I'm reading a book right now called The Craftsman, and you know, the writer makes a great point in it that the work for the craftsman it never stops, that they're constantly turning over their problems, you know, as they're out there in the world. And of course I use this to justify to my partner when I'm, you know, critiquing the, you know, the kerning on some signage that I see out there in the world, and she's, you know, very annoyed by that. I'm like, now I can say no, actually that's just my brain like getting better and doing the things that you know, going through the motions and evaluating and being aware of the world. And it helps me be a better designer. So now I can see we can all justify it that way now. So.
Yep. Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, cool. Well, we're coming to the end here. One thing I wanted to touch on, because this is pretty unique within our industry, but I just got back from a sabbatical, and you are now going out on your sabbatical. So,
yep.
tell us about that. Tell us about the sabbatical. Why does RSR prioritize something like that, offer that kind of benefit? And then also, you know, an add-on question: what are you doing with your sabbatical?
Yeah, no, I'm super stoked for it. I think I could have taken it a few years ago, but you know, lots of things got in the way, as we know, with the pandemic and all of that. But finally doing it, so super excited. Yeah, it's a great benefit that Ready Set Rocket offers. You don't really see this many places. I haven't come across it very often in my career. So yeah, I mean, I think it's amazing. I think the partners just kind of really put a lot of value on, you know, just living our lives, that work is not everything, and making sure there's, you know, good work-life balance, and we're prioritizing our mental health and, you know, all of those things. And part of that is just, you know, being able to have a nice reset like this. So going off for a month and doing whatever it is that you want to do, and just coming back with like a fresh perspective and just more relaxed and ready to go.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I definitely. So I just had my 10-year sabbatical, which was of course delayed with the pandemic as well. But having gone through it, kind of like, I had a 5 years. So every 5 years, Adobe gives a sabbatical. So I had a 5-year,
cool.
And I've been on my 10-year. And you know, it's having gone through that cycle a couple times, how valuable it's been to just get a little perspective that work is work, and work will always be there. But we're not sort of again, I think we can all get so wrapped up in the work that we're doing, and our identity becomes so attached to it that, you know, it can lead to things like burnout. It can lead to maybe maybe sort of toxic behaviors, I'll say, in terms of like, you know, again, we're all so wrapped up in progressing our careers and making sure that, you know, we're achieving those accolades that, we can kind of forget that, again, all this other stuff that we do in our life is as important. And it all, of course, if you're handling all of that and being happy there as well, like that, it comes back and actually benefits the work. And I think that's the cool thing to see with the sabbatical at Adobe, is an awareness that, hey, all that other stuff you're into is as important, and it actually has an impact on your work. You might not be able to draw a straight line, but it's there. And so people come back from there. And of course, then everybody takes a sabbatical. Like that's like, you're kind of required to do it. And that kind of levels the playing field as well, that this is not unique, that everyone's going to go and take this time off. You're not going to fall behind, right? All that sort of feeling of FOMO and everything that we have. And just go off and focus and get that new perspective. That's going to be really exciting.
Yeah, super excited. Yeah, I have part of it figured out. I'm still kind of working on what I'm doing the entire time. But I'll be traveling a little bit over to Europe. So I'm going to be in Italy for the first time. So that'll be nice. Going to do try to balance out not doing solely touristy stuff over there. So I'm going to go to southern Italy a little bit, where there's just more about the seaside and olive trees and laying around. So like I'm not just looking at museums and monuments the entire time. But I'll be doing a little bit of that. And then coming back, going to like a little music festival upstate. And the rest of it, I'm hoping to figure out somewhere I can go rent an Airbnb or something somewhere. And like, I think really just zen out and do some creative works and work on some side projects and things like that, that I have trouble making time to do. So it'll be nice.
We all do.
Yeah.
Well, that sounds lovely. I'm really excited for you. Again, I'm excited to even like connect with you when you come back to see how it went. It's like I feel like I'm still riding a little bit of those post sabbatical vibes. I mean, it's been like I think I'm in like week 3 having been back from 6 weeks gone. So yeah, I'm still getting a little bit of that halo going on. So it's exciting.
That's awesome.
Hey, we had another question from the chat as we're kind of getting close to wrap up here. I want to make sure we get to it from Patrick in the chat. Do you have a recommended kind of learning site to learn more, or on their own, like a Skillshare and resources that you utilize to continue to kind of grow your perspective and awareness or skills within the industry?
That's a good question. I mean, I personally don't have necessarily a specific resource I go to for that. Definitely, I mean, I do look on YouTube, I would say, quite a bit if I'm looking to learn how to do something. But yeah, I mean, the Adobe community, especially if you're working on like Adobe software, there's a lot of great resources there in terms of like tutorials and things like that you can tap into. But yeah, I think actually one that's, I guess it's more in the physical realm, but there's this site Coursehorse, which I think is great. It's kind of almost like the kayak for classes. So it's like almost anything. It's all mostly in-person stuff. I think they might have some streaming things, but yeah, it allows you to sort of like find, just if you want to learn, candle making, or you want to learn Photoshop, it's like, all kinds of things on there, which is really nice and kind of like pushes you to explore things you might not have thought of before.
Nice. I might have to check that out. I've been looking for now that I did through pottery for the first time on my sabbatical, and now I'm like, I could do pottery. That's amazing. I need to do more of that stuff with my hands, So I'm gonna go check that out myself. Good.
That's awesome. I'm not sure if it's just New York based or not, but
it's a good point. Well, good question. All right. Well,
it might be broader, but
maybe.
Yeah, no, it looks like they're
we'll
in some different cities. Yeah.
We'll check it out. Good deal. So the last question I always like asking people, because again, I always we talked about that awareness kind of the broader world and all the things that have an impact on our work that are outside of design. What are some of those things that keep you inspired, that keep you excited and curious about the creative world? Things that really get your brain turning.
Yeah, that's a good question.
Recommendations on that.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I love the internet. I'm working in the internet business, so I'm on there a lot. So for me, the goal is to try to get off there when I'm really trying to get inspired.
Yeah.
I mean, I might start there a little bit, but you really got to get away from the Pinterest and Instagram and TikTok and everything, so that you're not only being influenced by other, executions. And that's where I think you start to bring in like things get more homogenous. So I think trying to go outside and just go old fashioned analog, walking around, I think film is a big source of inspiration for me. I think there's a lot there you can bring into creative work, just in terms of like architecting stories and cinematography and different techniques there. I think there's a lot of direct and indirect kind of inspiration from film and, museums, things like that. But yeah, I mean, I think I get a lot of inspiration just being in New York City and walking around and just kind of taking it all in. You never know what you might see around the corner, and like it might kind of spark something. But yeah.
Yeah. That's such a great point. I listened to a really amazing interview recently where they were talking about whole body awareness, that when we focus solely on what we can take in with our eyes and we think about our brain sort of detached from everything else, we're kind of missing the bigger picture. So, that taking a walk through New York or taking a walk out in nature, that we're sort of ambiently sort of picking up all this information from sort of our whole body, and that it's having a restorative effect in many cases. And we really are sensing much more than we can even really see with our eyes. And so, we naturally discount it, but it's there, and we have that awareness, and it is having an impact. So I like that. It's very cool.
Exactly. Yeah. And I mean, I think that's where more original ideas come from, is like when the idea isn't just right there in front of you. Like it's, when you're looking on Pinterest or things like that, that's when it's like, okay, that's cool. And then you end up mimicking it, versus like, walking around or looking at other mediums is where you're kind of like, oh, like that makes me think of this other thing. And then that makes you think of, and before you know it, you have an idea developing, and it's actually coming from scratch more than actually just kind of something you saw that you're maybe subconsciously emulating.
Yeah. Great point. Yeah. Well, Amanda, thank you so much for being with us here today. Good luck on your sabbatical. So excited for you, and looking forward to seeing more great work from you and the team at Ready Set Rocket. So we'll wrap it up here today, and we'll bring back Kristen and Tom.
Thank you, guys.
So great.
What a great discussion. I love these last bits on kind of curiosity and just having your antenna up. Like your friend, I'm a total sucker for just critiquing UX of anything. Like, I wonder like why they did this before this, or and it's a fun practice to get into. So thank you, Amanda and Talon, for the great discussion today. Really enjoyed it.
Thank you. Me too. This was great. Thank you for
thank you both. Thank you both. Well, thank you all for joining today. This is the end, but we will be back again next month on September 29th, same time, 12 p.m. for a discussion with Beryl around design and the role of patterns. So be sure to join us for that. And thanks so much, Tom. Great to see you.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great day, afternoon, evening, wherever you're calling in from, and we'll see you soon.